Hey, what's up? As you saw by the title, we are looking at 5 different effects in Premiere Pro that will make your life a lot easier and your footage look a lot better. So a lot of times when we talk about effects, especially when working in a program such as Adobe Premiere, we're thinking of jumping into After Effects and, having to dynamic link and all of that stuff, which, for some effects, of course, it's needed. But there are some things that you can do right inside of Premiere that are huge time savers, that are just that extra little bit of polish that you can add without having to leave your editing program, so you can have everything done within your timeline. So we're gonna take a look at that right now. All right, so the first effect is the Gaussian Blur effect. And I love this effect because it's a very quick and easy way to blur the background. Like right now, if I were to add a title like you just saw, you can just add the effect onto your layer, as I'm sure you know how to do. And then in there, you can go in its effects controls panel. And over here, you can animate all the different parameters of these effects by hitting the stopwatch icon. And of course, if you see this icon next to anything, that means you can animate it. So you can add some keyframes, increase the blurriness, and there you go. You can have a quick and easy, transition or blurring effect. You can use this in so many ways. And by the way, as a quick side tip, make sure you put repeat edge pixels, because that will get rid of sort of those dead pixels that you get at the edge of frame. Once you start to blur things a little bit, it'll essentially repeat them at the corners, at the edges, and that makes it look better. Now, another thing that you can do with the Gaussian blur before we move on to the next effect is that you can add different masks, different things like that, so you can blur only certain sections of your frame, whether you're blurring someone's face or maybe, you're blurring a little bit of the background and the edges, and you just want the audience to really focus in on, whatever part of your frame. That's a very quick and dirty trick that you can do right inside of Premiere Pro without having to jump in to another program. So moving into number 2, this is again going in order of what I use the most, and that is the Lumetri effect, which is an effect that you can just drag and drop into your clips, or you can access through a workspace in Premiere, the color workspace. And this is a much more visually pleasing way to use the Lumetri effect in Premiere. And here you have all kinds of controls, such as correcting maybe the color temperature, the white balance of your footage, making all kinds of different adjustments like I do in all these videos, such as lifting the shadows a little bit just to get a little bit more fill in my face and a little bit more detail in the shadows. If you have a overexposed area like this one, this is pretty much recoverable, but if you have a slightly overexposed sky, you can bring that down with the highlights adjustment, and so on and so forth. You can really just explore what every slider and what every feature of the Lumetri color does. But it's really powerful when doing color correction, when tweaking some colors in your shot, and also adding your overall color grading. And also another big thing that is a pretty big deal that I should mention is that you can import LUTs through the Lumetri Color Panel. So that is super useful, and there is an option to add it right at the top, but another tip here is that I like to add it under the creative section, since that creative section, when you import a LUT there, it also gives you the intensity slider, which allows you to kind of adjust how intense the adjustments made from this LUT are onto your footage. Now, one last thing that I will mention on this panel, there's a ton to cover here, and like I said, it's for another video, but one other thing that I want to mention that is super great is this HSL secondary adjustments that you can do right at the bottom here. And this is really powerful because you can very easily get the origin teal look. You can separate certain colors and only affect certain color ranges of your footage. And you can do this by simply selecting a color in these color buttons, or even, using the color picker tool, and I can select the colors or the shades of my skin tone so that I am just isolating that. I can also use this color picker plus tool here to the side of the regular color picker. Why am I saying pickles? I had hot dogs with pickles, veggie hot dogs with pickles, so maybe that's why I'm thinking about pickles. But you can do that, and you can select all of the range, so make sure you have all of the shade of the skin tone. And now, if we want to preserve just the skin tones and we want to affect the environment and everything else, we can invert our selection here. And by the way, I can look at what I'm selecting by this color gray checkbox option, And here I can essentially affect everything else but my skin tones, so that we can do things like the, orange and teal look, or just affecting the colors of your environment and, changing the adjustments there. And you can get some really, really cool color grading looks just like that. And of course, there's so much more to cover, so I definitely encourage you to check out all the different sliders and play around and mess with them and just see what everything does. So Lumetri Color, really powerful for anything color grading, color correcting in Premiere. Now, moving on, I feel like I should just jump on to another workspace, Essential Sound Workspace Panel. Essential Sound Panel Workspace. A lot of times when you have rough audio, some rough recordings that might have some noise, maybe you forgot a fridge plugged in or an AC unit is going on in the background, you have some humming, all these different issues that I'm sure you've run into with audio on some productions. You can very easily adjust these things without having to go and dropping different effects to try to tackle, these issues, since that can get pretty complicated if you're not too familiar with audio. So that's why the Essentials Sound panel makes this process so much easier. You can select the different files that you want to affect, and you can assign them to a category. So for example, if we're treating this dialogue, I'm going to assign it to dialogue. And here you can see that there's these checkbox and sliders for the different type of treatment that you want to do to these sounds. And it makes it super simple because you're just dealing with one slider rather than, a bunch of other parameters that can get pretty overwhelming if you don't know what everything does. And the nice thing about this is that it's actually adding those more complex and more in-depth effects in the effects controls panel of all these clips. So you can always go select the clip and see what it's doing, but everything is linked to this simple slider that is very intelligently changing and altering and really cleaning up the audio by picking the best parameters of this more complex effect on the back end and giving you a much more simplified version with this interface in the Essential Sound panel here to the side. So that is a very quick and easy way for you to make adjustments to your audio and repair things in a very fast way. I am kind of thinking about these on the fly, so give me a sec. Offset. This is something that's really nice for motion graphics if you're trying to have an infinite scrolling background. Any kind of image that is tileable, you can apply the offset and animate the keyframe so that it can scroll continuously as a background, or you can use this with different clips. If you add this offset effect to an adjustment layer, you can now have two different clips just shift, and this can be really cool to create some custom transitions. So for example, you can use the offset effect along with a directional blur, and that can give you some nice artificial whip pans that you can create in your edit. A lot of these effects that I'm mentioning are just building blocks, and of course you can be creative with these individually or combine them and really create some really interesting moments in your edits. 5, I think, is where we're at. Now 5 isn't so much an effect, it's more of a transfer mode that you can apply to certain clips, and this is really, really powerful for overlays. So for example, I'm going to add an overlay to this footage, and it's from my pack, by the way, Vintage Light Effects. I'm going to use this one as well as the Particles pack. You don't have to use this is just an example for overlays, but if you are interested, KRISCOART.com/marketplace. There's a ton of stuff there. And here you can see that these overlays have a black background. So whenever you're dealing with stuff that has a black background, you can go under its transfer mode, under the effects controls panel, and set those elements to screen. And this is essentially going to get rid of the black background, and it's going to turn something that is just stacked on top of your video as an overlay, essentially. And it's really powerful because you can add a lot of detail, a lot of nice little touches and effects just by importing footage like this and overlaying it in this way. Now, of course, there are other transfer modes, and there's some that are worth mentioning, such as the multiply. So a lot of times if you have, for example, like a 50% gray overlay, or this is very typical with like these film grain overlays that you might sometimes find. I don't have those yet, but they are coming soon, and you can just set them to multiply, and now you're just getting the fine grain detail while getting rid of the grayish background. And of course you can't use screen because that would get rid of the grain itself, since it's more black and has darker colors, and it multiply only gets rid of that certain shade. Another one worth mentioning is overlay. And again, just like the Lumetri panel, just go through these transfer modes, because each and every one of these is going to affect the way that you're overlaying things in a slightly different way. But that is a very powerful thing to do in Premiere, especially for music videos or transition moments, or even adding flares like we saw from the vintage light effects pack that can be used in narrative work and used for also realistic transitions. Also, take a break real quick. This episode is sponsored by Skillshare. You know I love them. I've mentioned them many times before on this channel. They've been a long supporter, but there's a reason why I keep recommending them. They honestly have a huge library of content that you can expand your knowledge in, or even just explore some new hobbies. And on top of that, it's curated specifically for learning, meaning there are no ads, and they're always launching new premium classes. And by the way, if we're talking about Premiere, there's a ton of stuff of editing, but even of editing specifically in Premiere Pro. And a great place to start is right here. This essentially masterclass that Cinecom has put together for Premiere Pro and new Premiere Pro users is absolutely great. It's a great starting point to have all of the basics all in one place. And if you want to expand beyond the ideas that we explored in this video, that's definitely a place to do that in. And if you're within the first 1,000 people that use my link in the description, they get a free trial of Skillshare Premium. And I really love it because it's also very, very affordable. The premium membership starts at just under $10. So, very easy to get in, signed up. And with the trial that I've mentioned, by using the link in the description, you can actually check it out and, explore, see what's there, get familiar with it. And I'm pretty sure you're going to love it. So huge shout out to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Check out the link in the description. And with that being said, that brings us to the end of the video, really. I hope you enjoyed these 10 tips. I hope that they've made your life easier in your editing. Maybe they've sped up your edits to make them visually interesting, or maybe it added some tricks in your bag that you can use in your next edit. I do hope you enjoyed them. And if you did, also check out the packs that I've mentioned that I've used throughout the video. There's a ton of stuff on the marketplace. I'm really focusing this year on building that out. So if you want to show some love, and if you genuinely have an interest in the things that I have to offer there, definitely check that out as well. And with that being said, my name is Chris Trini for KRISCOART, and I'll see you next time.